Hi guys, Jay Knowlton here once again, and YouTube is not easy. Well, not the YouTube part, the making videos part is not easy because I filmed this video yesterday, but I connected this microphone, here, and the funny thing about microphones is that if they are not on, they produce no sound, obviously. And sometimes this button isn't always automatically turned on. Got to the video, put it on my computer. It was like 18 minutes long and there was no sound. And then I couldn't be bothered filming it again. And luckily, one of my students cannot attend their lesson today. So I have a bit of time and I'm going to use my time productively. So what might be disappointing for some is that I'm going to talk about the new visa rules again and how they're changing. However, I found, I guess, I don't know if it's not like a secret, it's just on the internet. There is like a blog kind of website in Japan called Abema, and they have a TV, like a not quite YouTube, but they have a video service. And they actually had a discussion, a Japanese discussion, all in Japanese naturally, about the changes in the visa. And they had like a visa lawyer, a former politician, and a few other people. And it's about 37 minutes long. If you can speak Japanese or understand Japanese at least, it's worth the watch. I'll put it in the link down. I'll put the link in the description down below. But I kind of want to run off a few points from the video because there's some things that I kind of reflected on and what they talked about as Japanese people. So I just want to talk about what I thought of this video. So first of all, they talked about how the requirement is basically going to be 479,000 yen per month, which works out to what, 5.6 million yen, because that is the average household income in Japan. And they basically talked about how there are basically zero jobs that foreigners do that average that kind of salary as it is. Of course, there are some that probably do go higher, but on an average, there's only one, which was kind of maybe like a researcher, maybe like in that kind of field. And that was like 538,000. Like I'm going to put screenshots of the graphs that they used. But basically every service and even like I think the lowest was like fukushi, which is like kind of care, like nursing as in taking care of old people and working in childcare, which was like 245,000. So you're almost like half of what you're required. Like, ALTs don't even make the list because and I don't think ALTs counts as kyoiku, which is education, because you're not technically an educator. But basically, no one makes this salary. And they had a token gaijin. I don't think it's her real name. Her name was Jessica. And they gave a bit of a profile of Jessica. She's 30 years old. She's in her 30s, Sanjudai. She's been living in Japan for 11 years. She lives by herself. And she works in a care home. And she makes 286,000 yen a month. And she also has night shifts. Now, to be honest with you, somebody who works night shifts, I thought that would pay more. Like, it seems like you should get paid better for working the night shifts, as that's an inconvenient time for most people working. Now, I'm not sure if this profile is real. I'm sure Jessica's not her real name, but it doesn't feel like I've ever met an American who works in nursing before. I don't think I've ever heard of anyone. And the way that she spoke Japanese, and kind of, you don't really see much of her, but you kind of see like, I don't know. I don't know if she's actually American or not, because I've never heard of an American doing nursing. It kind of feels like, what a weird thing to be doing. You have so many more options as a graduate from America. Anyway, it says since she was 13, she's been interested in Japan, fashion, culture, the food. She did a year abroad in Japan, and it says she studied Japanese at university. And this is something that I've actually found is that I don't know what they teach when people study languages at university, but her Japanese was not great. Like it was good. I mean, considering she was giving an interview, and it's probably not easy to do that. It didn't seem like her Japanese was that good. It felt like a lot of it was reading of a script, and she would mix her keigo and her casual. And of course, Japanese is not easy, but considering she studied it at university, I would hope that you would be like, for example, I studied chemistry at university. You couldn't just become a person working in the chemistry industry without doing that. However, with languages, you can study languages on your own. So if you go to university to study a language, I feel like you should be like mega pro full fluency by the time you graduate. Anyway, and it says that she's got family in the US. Now, this is something that she's going to touch on later. And I'm actually going to jump to it now. So it kind of talks about like the differences between permanent residency and naturalization. We all know what they are already. But they asked her like why. So basically, she talked about how she will never make that salary working in this industry, and she'd even gone as far as to get a certification in the industry, which is good. But she talks about how she would never make, she would never be able to make that salary ever, because I guess it says something like, yeah, her salary was 286, so she's 200,000 yen off a month. So she would never be able to do it. And they said, like, I like Japan. I don't want to leave Japan. And they asked her, like, well, why don't you naturalize then? You're planning to stay here forever. And her kind of answer was she has family back home in the US. And maybe once they've all gone, then she will consider it. Which for me sounds quite strange. Like, I do feel like maybe we put too much of our own lives on hold because we have family elsewhere. Our family are still our family, even if not. She could still go to the US at any time. But I guess there's also that, like, I guess she's expecting if something really bad happened to them, she might have to move back to the US. But if she doesn't plan to leave Japan ever, why doesn't she just naturalize? I think that's a good point. For me, in my case, I don't want to naturalize because I might, there could be a chance that I could change my mind. And also, it's not just about me, really. It's also about my daughter. So she's half British, which means that when she gets older, if she wants to make the choice that she chooses to be British, I don't want to take away that choice for her. At the end of the day, I brought her into this world. I'll take her out. No, no, no. I brought her into this world, and I don't want to take away potential choices that she might have. I don't know if me naturalizing takes away her half Britishness. I'd have to look into that. And again, I have PR, I have a house. Unless it's to vote, and if you do live in Japan, it's like the voting is almost irrelevant because the party never changes anyway. Anyway, so that's her situation. And they did talk about how the permanent residency visa is supposed to be like you integrate into Japanese culture. And of course, the money aspect is very important to support yourself. But they did keep bringing up that they thought the purpose of permanent residency was that you integrate into Japan and you become part of Japan. And they kind of discussed about how it does seem a bit strange that it's supposed to be integration into Japan. So why have they suddenly become so focused on the money? Now, here is something that I do think I can change my mind on. I still think the 10-year rule should apply about the PR thing. And for most cases, I believe the salary could be, I think the salary is fine. I think it is important to self support your future. You fund your own future in Japan. You shouldn't expect the government to fund out of its pocket for you. If you're gonna make the decision to move here, you should fund it yourself. I only think that's fair. They did talk about as well how in the past like 20 years, even though the number of foreign residents in Japan has doubled, actually the people who have got permanent residency has almost tripled. So the proportion of residents to permanent residents is growing. It used to be only about 15% of residents had permanent residency. Now it's more than 20%, I believe, maybe even getting close to 30%. That is a big jump. And if that does keep continuing, then I don't know. I don't know. Does that cause problems? I guess if you're not able to fund yourself, I guess it does cause problems. I do think that, for example, in Jessica's case, she is working in an industry that Japan really needs, the nursing industry. She got the certification, she's been doing it for a long time. Now, I don't know in Japan if they give extra pensions for specific jobs. Like, for example, my family in the UK, they're all teachers, and teachers get an extra pension for that job. I don't know if that happens in Japan. However, I think, for example, if you plan on being an ALT for 20 years, like, fuck off. Like, why should they give you anything? You made the choice to work in a crappy job for so long that really doesn't make much of a difference. However, if you do work in the nursing industry, I feel like there should be some kind of category that's like service to Japan, but like point system. Now, if you work in the nursing industry, and especially she does nights, I think that is a good case for you being a real benefit to the country, not just financially, well, not financially, but as a person contributing to the community around you. And I think maybe that should also, if you do volunteer work, if you do community services, if you do something to promote cities or something like that, I think maybe it would be cool to kind of open those gates to see, like, okay, let's see if we can create this system of where we want people to integrate in Japan. And let's do something that encourages them to be part of the community and help the communities. For example, when I lived in Gunma, I used to volunteer at a kind of it's kind of like a daycare for disabled children who had like maybe autism, Down syndrome, cerebral palsy, like all different kinds of disabilities. And I would go there once a month and do an English lesson for them. And it'd be like 2 hours. There'd be like the lesson part, games, play, dances, all that kind of stuff. And it was really cool for me and hopefully for them. And then we had like parties and stuff like that. Those kind of things would be really great. Now, there's an English school not too far away from here, run by an Australian guy, really cool guy. He was on the PTA for our daughters, not our daughters together, but his own kids. He's got a lot of them. Um, Elementary. He was the PTA. I'm on the PTA this year. He runs events in the nearby park for free where people can come do a bit of English, play around. Those kind of things I think are really cool ideas. So if there was a way to be like, okay, if your salary is not necessarily great, however, you've proven that you are really trying to make Japan a better place, maybe there can be some kind of category for that. What do you think? Please let me know. Because I think Jessica, like, even though her salary can be quite low, depending on her rent, she might be able to save enough for her own pension. And I think care workers should really get a boosted pension because they're doing a really tough job. Now, this is where it gets a bit complicated because let's talk about construction and factory work because they are also great services to Japan. Now, farming and stuff like that. Now, this is where I think Japan is staying quiet intentionally as to not discriminate. I think they obviously don't want like hundreds of thousands of Vietnamese people to become permanent residents. Now I'm not I don't care. Basically, it's not about me. I think they don't want that to happen. Which is why they have the technical trainee program. It's capped at a certain amount of years, from what I understand. I think it much benefits them to kind of cycle in and out younger people who want to work. Because at the end of the day, like um, with Jessica, for example, she's come to Japan and she loves Japan. So that's the benefit for her. She loves Japan. For Vietnamese people or Indonesian people and stuff like that, Filipinos, they are also coming here for their benefit and their family's benefit too. They come here, send some money back, and of course, even though it might be 30,000, because I used to work with a lot of Filipinos, like they would send maybe 30,000 and 40,000, and that would pay for the whole family's lifestyle back home. So there is a lot of benefit for them already without the permanent residence. And I don't know how that would work. It's almost more of a benefit for them if more people could cycle in and out, work for a few years, send some money back, if that makes sense. And then if they want to stay in Japan and find a different industry to work in, that's a possibility for them as long as they can get sponsored. Now, they did talk a little bit about like the differences between the permanent residency and naturalization, about how if you do get the oh no, it's not about the differences. They did talk about one of the benefits of getting permanent residence is that you are free to work in any industry. Now, of course, I understand that. In the case of self-employment, of course, I understand that, because if I didn't, well, of course, I'm also married, so I would have a visa anyway. But if I wasn't married and if I didn't have permanent residency, self-employment is much more difficult. I don't know if they still have the kind of self-sponsor visa where if you're making a specific amount of money, you can self-sponsor. But of course, with the business management visa going away and stuff like that, it's much more difficult. So we just have to have a bit of a look at that. Then they talked about how you have the freedom to work anywhere. But as I said, like I don't really think there's many jobs in Japan that you could do that wouldn't sponsor you anyway. I feel like a lot of companies sponsor you for all different kinds of jobs nowadays. Like, for example, working in social media for like, there's all those kind of YouTubers who are part of, was it Kadakawa or whatever it's called, where they can get sponsored being part of that industry, working in factories, working in schools, working in Japanese companies. You can get sponsored anywhere now. I don't necessarily know of any industries that would hire you and you don't need sponsorship. Um, the only kind of jobs you'd be looking for, to be honest with you, are maybe probably like going to a restaurant or working in a kombini. And that's not really what they need you for anyway. Not that's what they don't need permanent residence for that. Let's just say that. But in terms of the requirements of the residency, I have changed my mind a little bit. I do think adding that little service to Japan category could be beneficial, but please let me know what you think. Is this the last video about the new changes? I don't know. Thanks all for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.